Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Correspondence course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome to all of those that are watching online. I know there's many people that we've been hearing from in the Philippines, in South America, and in Africa, and in Europe. It's great to hear from everyone, and always send us a message and let us know, especially if you have questions. And we do get questions in quite often, and we welcome all of your questions. So please feel free to send the questions in. Send them in case you don't know. If you're watching on the website, you can send them into info@peacefulsolution.org, info@peacefulsolution.org, or you can also send them to the official Peaceful Solution. They're on Facebook. And we also have our 1-888 number. It's 1-888-613-9494. And you can always, if you're nervous about it, you can leave a message. You can send something. It's fine, perfectly fine. We know some people say that we had a couple of people say, I wanted to ask the question, but it took me almost 3 months to build up the nerve to ask. Don't even hesitate. If you have a question, please send it. There's no harm in asking a question. I can promise you, when we first started going through these, I had a notebook full of questions. And some of them were very easily answered if I would have paid attention myself. So once again, it's always important, because if you don't know where it's at in the books, that we take it back and go back through the books and show you where it's at, so we can have everyone at the same pace. It's extremely important. As you're going to see tonight, and you've seen in William's last class, and you've seen this through a lot of Katan's classes and David's classes also, is we hear the echo of the other books, so to speak. The things that we've learned, how they're tying into what we're going through here, the responsibility unit, because we're finishing up the fifth of the series of 5. And you'll hear from the character to the acceptance to the self-control to the respect, all the way into the responsibility unit. All of these books will kind of echo into this one, tying it all together, because now we have the information. We're learning how we have to be responsible for the application of that information. And that's easier said than done. It's easier said how to do something right than it is to do it. It takes effort to do it right. And it's not just with character education. That's with everything in life. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of desire, and a lot of willingness, determination, being courageous, and setting all those positive character traits in front of our minds and keeping it in the forefront of our minds, letting it be the first part of our thoughts. And that's the challenge, is what's right, now applying what is right. That's for all of us. I should say we, not you, but all of us doing that. But we're going to look back here to Procedure 4. This is where William, he left off in the middle of this as he was covering a lot of information we'll discuss again tonight, and then we'll move forward. So we're here on Lesson Plan 2, page D, Lesson Plan 2, page D, and it says, explain that to become responsible in all areas, we must become aware of our thoughts and how they affect our choices and actions. And once again, we've covered a lot of that information already on how these things will affect us. Self-control unit chapters 2 and 3 deal a lot with emotions, but remember, before we have those emotions, there's a thought process. And the character unit deals with that as well as the acceptance unit, but how these things start tying in together, you'll find in the 2nd and 3rd chapter of the self-control unit, because these feelings, these emotions come from thoughts. Once again, it says, explain that because we sometimes make irresponsible choices when we are angry, we should be especially careful of anger, hostility, or violent thoughts. Once again, why? Because of these thoughts. We should already realize that these thoughts will lead to behavior, to action, emotion, and action that will be just like the thoughts we're trying to process if not dealt with properly. Notice it says here, have students to complete the exercise found on page 28 and discuss why the scenario 2 exemplifies how practicing self-control can help us control our thoughts. Emphasize that anger without self-control can result in irresponsible and dangerous choices. And of course, William covered that on how uncontrolled anger turns into rage. And it's very destructive. And he gave quite a few examples on the destruction that it brings. And we'll talk about some of those again briefly tonight. And then it says, have students turn to page 32 in their handbook and read the section entitled, I can make self-control part of my character. Explain that they can identify negative thoughts by determining if their thoughts are violent or angry. Thoughts can also be negative if they lack compassion or humility. stress that negative thoughts can be directed toward themselves or others. And once again, you hear the chapter 2 of the respect unit echoing back into that when you talk about negative thoughts toward yourself. That's where we talked about self-respect and how we have to learn to develop respect for ourselves before we ever learn to respect someone else. So turning over here to page 29, this is where William left off, and he was discussing some simple ways to control anger. And he was going through some examples, and if we could put up the first slide, he had this slide up and he had some information with it. It was talking about appropriate ways to deal with anger. And, okay, I can see it here on the screen. So appropriate ways to deal with anger. And, of course, he referenced pages 75 to 77, and that allows you to make sure you should have that side note there in your responsibility unit now, so you'll have something to go back and reference very quickly. William covered that fairly much in detail, so we'll go a little bit past that, but that's what he kind of led off with, and he was explaining how we've covered the appropriate ways, and of course we'll talk about a few more. Some of these are repetitious tonight on how we are to be able to bring these things into control. And it's not wrong to have a thought in your mind that you have to bring into control. All of us could see things that we are not pleased with. Remember, anger just tells you that you're not in agreement with something. It doesn't mean you're right, but the thought being in your mind is not the issue. It's what you do with the thought that becomes the issue. And of course, we're learning together how to bring these thoughts into subjection, how to control these thoughts before they lead to these emotions and they get out of control, and of course they bring harm to ourselves, someone else, or the environment. And this is truly where responsibility ties into this, because we're the ones responsible for ourselves. As William pointed out last class, once again reemphasizing, no one makes us angry. We choose to become angry. And of course, when we let anger turn to rage, that's ourselves allowing that to take place. So we have to be mindful how we control our thoughts, how we put forth the effort to control our thoughts, and then what we do to process it. So continuing on here, you look at the very first part of page 29, and it says, know your anger triggers. And I'll reference you back to William's last class because he covered that very well, and going back into the self-control unit. But it says here that take the time to understand what triggers your anger. Do you get angry if you feel you are being treated unfairly? Do people taking your belongings without permission make you angry? And once again, he reemphasized there, well, no one makes you angry. Does it cause you? Does it cause the process in you to start? Do you find yourself arguing with people easily? Now, getting into the second part, this is where we're going to pick up tonight. It says develop an anger management plan. And that's what we all have to go through. Once again, we're putting this into play. We covered it in the self-control unit on page, not on just page, but in chapter 3, the self-control unit of page, once again, not page, but chapter 3. Too many things going through my mind here. But in chapter 3, we talked about an anger management plan. If we could put up the next slide, we had this, bear this in mind. And of course, you see where it says, don't let your anger control you like a puppet on a string. Control your anger. Don't let it control you. And at the very bottom, you see it says, we have the ability to think, reason, and control our thoughts and actions. Therefore, we need to take responsibility for controlling our anger. So we've already been talking about being responsible for the choices we make. All the way back in the self-control unit, when we talked about not letting our emotions control us, we needed to control them. We said that we have to be responsible enough to do that. And then, of course, in developing this anger management plan, William brought up the next slide here, which is preparation requires self-control. And this is found in the respect unit. This is what he referred to as chapter 5. This is in chapter 5 of the respect unit. And once again, you see here it says self-control is the ability to control what you think, feel, and do. The foundation of self-control rests on moral principles. Remember, those are rules. You must control your thoughts, feelings, and actions in order to be a moral person who demonstrates concern for yourself, others, and the environment. Self-control plays an important role in learning how to respond to negative, disrespectful behavior. When you consistently use self-control, you can avoid acting impulsively and avoid the trap of disrespect. A lack of self-control is the cause of much of the disrespectful behavior that exists today. If you respond to disrespect without self-control, it will be like fighting fire with fire. The fire will never go out. It will only get worse. And of course, with that in mind, he brought up the definition, of insanity, where you do the same thing over and over and over and you expect a different result, or you talk about where we talked about, trying to remember if it's the character unit or the self-control unit, where it talks about you drink poison and wait for the other person to die. You drink the poison and wait for the other person to die. And of course, I bring this up because William didn't have time to get into this very deeply, but this all ties in together with what we're looking at, not just as a society, but on a global scale. If you bring up the next slide, you see here, U.S. lawmakers passed sweeping $886 billion defense spending bill. Now, $886 billion. That is an enormous amount of money. I was speaking to someone in Ukraine today. They work for UNICEF, and they've been talking and working with a peaceful solution for about 2 years now. And they were telling me that in Ukraine, which is where they have been for the last 2 years, they said that, it's time to leave. And I asked, well, what do you mean it's time to leave? There's nowhere else to go. We have been moving and moving and moving for the last year, and the bombs keep dropping, and we have went to the last city, and they said, it was 3 children died today. And you just kind of sit there and you listen to what they have to say, because the person was still in shock of seeing children die. But this seems like a fairy tale to people that aren't in harm's way. When it's on the other side of the world and it's not taking place in your backyard, it doesn't seem real. And that's something here in the United States that it seems fictitious. It seems like a movie. When you turn the news off or you turn off the horrors that you see, whether it be a TikTok video or a YouTube video or something you see on social media, you feel like when you turn the computer off, the danger goes away. But there are real people that are involved in these things, and the last thing they said was, I'm tired. I finally have to leave. And I asked, well, what about all the children you've been helping this whole time? And then they said, well, I don't want to leave, but what can I do? It's the option that they came to a conclusion. Do I die with the children or do I live another day? Which one is it? Sadly, I don't have an answer for that question, because we can't control what's taking place with the thoughts of world leaders and those who inspire the world leaders to make these thoughts. But if you go to the next slide, this is one thing we can control, and all this is going to tie together tonight. Remember on page 105 of the character unit, we covered the ripple effect and how character, society, and the world. Now, when the United States passes an $886 billion budget to combat, as it says in the bill, if you read it, the Indo-Pacific region, China, defending Taiwan, continue to defend Ukraine, and to get more involved in the defending of Guyana and the oil deposits off the coast of Venezuela, Guyana, in Essequibo. All of these things that are being passed, and of course they mentioned Gaza also, in funding Gaza, it was talk more about how we're going to spend more billions of dollars in keeping this going. And I encourage everyone to read the defense bill, and if you can find one solution where peace is mentioned, just one sentence, find one word where peace is mentioned, please send it to us. I'd love to see it. I've read it a couple times and I haven't seen it yet. The full bill I'm still reading, it's 3,100 pages. And I haven't seen anywhere where it talks about bringing peace whatsoever. And once again, if you notice, back to our slide of chapter 5, the ripple effect, we talked about how our character dictates our behavior and our action, and it is the foundation by which we interact with others. Think about this on a global scale and what we just talked about with nations passing these defense budgets. There are very few activities that we do on a daily basis which we do not directly interact with someone. Can you recall a day when you did not see or speak to anyone? As human beings, we need to interact and associate with others. It is this need to belong that compels us to have friends and people that we can interact with and feel accepted by. Think about this on a global scale. You know, most of you will talk to people internationally and not even realize that you're doing it. If you ever call customer service for AT&T or anybody else, usually you're getting a country outside the United States that's providing a call service because it's much less expensive. You'll either get South America or you get India. It depends on what time of the day you call. And I think we mentioned the story before of how one of the classes when we went to Argentina in 2014, one of the groups that asked us to come teach was AT&T. And I thought it was very interesting that AT&T, and I didn't really understand, William was the one that was formulating all of the classes for us. He was getting the schedule together. And when he first told me AT&T, I thought, okay, what are we going to teach AT&T? And then I started reading and I realized AT&T is known to have the worst customer service in the world. And I thought, well, that's a starting point, I guess. And I come to find out, well, who are we going to teach? We're going to teach customer service. And what is the problem that we're going to be addressing? Suicide. And when we went to start teaching, I'm glad I never lost self-control dealing with AT&T customer service. Because I'm glad nobody went, I recognize that voice. When you go there and you're teaching people who, this is a dream job if you live in Argentina. This is a job that people will wait in line for years to get because the pay is so low and this is paying so well. And if you can speak English, you can get a job, but you're going to have to wait in line. So it's a dream job. And in this dream job, they go to work every day to be yelled at, to be cussed at, to be screamed at, to be told how low and sorry they are, to be told how their English is not quite what it needs to be. And they said, you know, when people are yelling at us, they're seeing the voice of whoever at the store there in America or whatever occurred in America. That's what they're really mad about, but they're taking it all out on us. And people did not know how to mentally process being treated like trash from one phone call to the next. And their whole goal was to help somebody. That's what their job was. But they have rules they have to operate within. And if they go outside of these rules, they lose their jobs. So here are the rules they're given. This is what they have to do. And inside of all of that, they have to solve our problems if you have AT&T. Well, when you listen to them from their end, you see it a very different way. You know, and it really helped me in dealing with a major bank here in the United States that recently just canceled out a lot of stuff on a lot of Americans. When I had to deal with customer service and dealing with some of the stupidity, I continually thought about those people in Argentina. But if I'd never seen that before, it would have not crossed my mind. But it really made me consider how I speak to others. Well, when we talk about this on a scale of society as you and I, think about how governments are talking to each other. Everybody's making a stance. You know, they're posturing, passing record defense bills. China's going to do the same thing. Russia's going to do the same thing. Iran's going to do the same thing. North Korea's going to do the same thing. Everybody's going to follow suit. Why? Because everybody has to if they want to keep up with what's taking place. So when you think about this as an individual, think about this also as a global scale. But then we get down once again to individualize it here. It says, it is this need to belong that compels us to have friends, people we can interact with and feel accepted by. Same thing on a global scale. It is the same need to belong that compels adults to marry, raise families, and allow people to form neighborhoods and communities. When a group of people live under a common body of laws and share common values and interests, they are called a society. Well, it's that common body of laws that we've lost on a global scale. You know, whether you see the shooting in Prague that just took place, or you see the endless murders that took place this week here in the United States, a lot of murder-suicides this last week, which are extremely common this time of year. Think about that as we continue reading. It says, in the same way character shapes an individual, it also shapes society, which in turn forms our nation. In essence, character can shape our world. A choice, either positive or negative, starts with one person, but can affect not only that person, but also a family, society, and even the world. We live in a society where our need to belong makes us interdependent upon one another. Because we rely and need each other, our behaviors affect one another in positive and negative ways. Our ability to affect each other is like a stone dropped into a pond, causing one ripple after the next, each one larger than the one before. Now, that's not just positive choices or decisions. Negative choices and decisions also ripple outwardly. And when we see what's taking place, as William mentioned last week, it's hard to believe there's anything left from Gaza. And if you would just look at this from a business standpoint, since most people watching are taxpayer citizens here in the United States that are in the auditorium, if someone told you that you're going to spend $2 million to destroy something that's $2,000, you look at them like they're crazy. Why would I spend $2 million to get rid of something that costs $2,000? Well, that's what occurs when the United States shoots their missiles to defend rockets coming from the Houthi rebels. They cost $2,000 that the Houthi rebels are shooting, and we're knocking them down with $2 million missiles. Or then when you talk about dropping, $15 million bombs on clay huts. And once again, who decides who the bad guy is? Now, I want you to think about that, because we're talking about ways to deal with our anger, and we're talking about how we can be responsible for controlling it. But if you look at the defense bill that we talked about, and if you take time to read it, just read a news article. Look how many people voted to either pass it or to deny it. I'm not going to tell you the number, but it's scary. There's more people watching this class than decided to vote for that, pass that defense bill. And that controls what goes on in this world. That's a ripple effect that's going to ripple very hard. I've got a short video I want to show you. If you want to see where the defense money goes into development, the video is a little bit blurry. The quality is not all the way there, but it's a video that is very interesting to watch. And this is where your defense money goes. Part of it. If we could go ahead and play the video.
Pilots directed almost 3,000 precision strikes last year. We're super proud of it. It allows you to separate the bad guys from the good. It's a big deal. But we have something much. They used to say guns don't kill people. People do. Well, people don't. They get emotional, disobey orders, aim high. Let's watch the weapons make the decisions. Now, trust me, these were all bad guys. Now, that is an airstrike of surgical precision. It's one of a range of products. Trained as a team, they can penetrate buildings, cars, trains, evade people, bullets, pretty much any countermeasure. They cannot be stopped. Now, I said this was big. Why? Because we are thinking big. Watch. A $25 million order now buys this. Enough to kill half a city. The bad half. Nuclear is obsolete. Take out your entire enemy, virtually risk-free. Just characterize him, release the swarm.
Of integrating and miniaturizing technologies that we already have. I'm Stuart Russell, a professor of computer science at Berkeley. I've worked in AI for more than 35 years. Its potential to benefit humanity is enormous, even in defense. But allowing machines to choose to kill humans will be devastating to our security and freedom. Thousands of my fellow researchers agree. We have an opportunity to prevent the future you just saw, but the window to act is closing fast.
I would like to make sure that everyone understands we agree with the man that spoke second, but there wasn't anything the man doing the presentation said that the peaceful solution agreed with whatsoever. Once again, you're going to rely on computer-generated equipment by humans, programmed by humans, that are now going to determine who the bad guy is. We just had less people watching this class vote for this defense bill, so who's going to determine who the bad guy is? And if you go online, that's only part of the video. It shows examples where they send these into schools to kill what they consider bad students. It's interesting to know that this video is 6 years old. So this is technology that's been around for a while. It's already been in use. The Mossad in Israel uses it quite often. This is where money goes to develop this ripple effect, this effect on society. And if you notice, he said with that weapon, you can take out half a city, just the bad guys. If you have a city of 1 million people and 500,000 are bad, you probably need to be educating a little better, not killing them, educating them. But society has gotten to where we think that spending money for the bigger weapon or the smaller weapon, the most deadliest weapon, that's success. But in reality, that is the utmost definition of failure. So once again, keep those things in mind as we continue to proceed here. Once again, about this developing an anger management plan. Killing half of a city is not going to fix something. Taking out the bad guy is not going to fix something. They've been taking out the bad guy for hundreds, thousands of years, and the bad guy never goes away. It evolves. Sometimes you tend to wonder, is the bad guy the one that's taking out the people? It says, once you become aware of your anger triggers, set up a plan to handle your anger before it gets out of control. An anger management plan is a simple way to diffuse your anger and to be responsible for your actions. And that's what we're talking about, is taking responsibility. And remember what the responsibility that we've said from the beginning is. Not to bring harm to yourself, to someone else, or the environment. Any great anger management plan will include using self-control. Below are some guidelines to help you design your own anger management plan. Remember, what works well for one person might not work well for someone else. Find out what helps you to control your anger and then make it a habit. And that should re-echo, page 73 of the character unit. We're talking about becoming a VIP, a very important person, or value, imitate, practice, becoming a role model. And then you see here, the first thing to do if you feel yourself getting angry is to, of course, you see the STOP acronym. And if we can put up our next slide, this is also found in Chapter 5 of the Respect unit, but it's also found in the Character and Self-Control unit, speaking of how we deal with these things. And this was what we were talking about, what to do if someone disrespects you. Whether, the anger comes up through embarrassment or whatever it could be, disappointment. Notice once again, it says an easy way to remember how to practice self-control is to think of the acronym STOP, which stands for stop, think, options. Consider your options. Then don't let it sit there. Well, I could shoot this guy with a drone, or I could blow him up with a nuclear weapon, or I could just go in and just use one of those nuclear tsunami deals and just wash out the whole city. No, consider your options that doesn't bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment, and then proceed with the right choice. And notice once again, you see here it says stop and acknowledge that someone is saying or doing something that you feel is disrespectful. Think about ways you can respond. William talked about the RESPOND acronym last class and how the application of that goes into effect. And then, of course, options must be considered and weighed. And of course, the consequences of these choices. Remember, without self-control, negative feelings can lead to negative actions. It is up to you to consider the possible outcome of your choices. Proceed by making a decision that is morally correct and respectful. And of course, you want to make sure that when you read this stop and think acronym, you just don't go through that you actually rehearse it back into the minds of the students. This is what we've covered. Because as we said in the beginning, as humans, we learn by repetition. And that's a scientific fact. We learn through things being repeated over and over and over and over, and that's how they become a habit or become part of our life. So notice once again, it says the first thing to do if you feel yourself getting angry is to stop and think. And then, of course, here are some, just a few things that we can do to help control that anger is to count to 10 or 20 before you say or do anything. This will give you an opportunity to calm down. Keep in mind, just because you're counting to 10 or 20 does not mean the person that's helping you with these emotions get going is going to be quiet during that time. Most likely they're not. Also, be aware of your thoughts. Are they positive or negative? Remember, we covered hindsight is 20/20. When you have the ability to stand back and look after a situation has taken place and you evaluate the choices you made, and you realize, I should have done that differently. I should have reacted differently. I should have said this differently. Well, that's what we need to be processing to try to eliminate these regrets from decisions that we make. And then, of course, think of the consequences of your actions. Acting on negative thoughts can result in you or someone else getting hurt. And that's really what we always try to abstain from, is never bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. It's very important that we consider everything we do. And of course, once again, we are responsible for what we do. We're responsible for what we say, how we react. We have no one to blame but ourselves. And that's really what this responsibility unit is doing, is bringing it all together, letting us know the things that we've learned. Yes, self-control is the foundation of all moral behavior, but we have to be responsible enough to apply it. And of course, looking over to page 30, it says, when people do not control their thoughts or their anger, the results can be deadly. And once again, this is one situation of, if you have time, go online and Google how many murder-suicides there were in the United States this week. It's kind of mind-blowing how many take place. This last week, I was out of the country, and I was able to watch news sources we don't have here in the United States, and that was all they talked about. Murder-suicides in the United States, Gaza, and Ukraine. But it was mind-blowing. I was kind of shocked seeing, because these news sources are outside the United States, so you don't really have the filtering that we have here. And a lot of these countries want to show why you should not follow the United States. This is what their own citizens are doing. And, of course, so they show more of the negative things, what we consider the bad things. It's very different watching news about the United States when you're in the United States and when you're outside the United States. So the image that people have in their mind is very different depending on whether the country is a friend or foe of the United States. So keep that in mind. But, I would encourage you, as a teacher, I would do this as a teacher. Always be very careful when covering these things. We've had many students that they've suffered from suicides in their family. When you're covering things like this, you have to be very careful. So you don't want to kind of indulge in this, so to speak. You want to make sure you're covering it, but you also have to keep in mind that the odds of someone sitting in your class or watching us online right now, the odds are very high that they've had to go through this. Obviously, if it takes place like this family went through, there's nobody left to go through it, but there's still people that are left from suicides and murder-suicides and so forth. But it says here, a family killed, teens suspected in 4 slayings. And this took place in Andy, Washington, January 1st. A 16-year-old boy was arrested after his parents and 2 siblings were found dead along a rural road near the small mountain community in northeast Washington. Investigators said the bodies were covered with snow. All 4, including the 2 siblings, ages 11 and 18, were believed to have been shot at their home on December 23rd and then taken to a nearby road in the family pickup, investigators said. The sheriff's office said friends and family members notified authorities after the family had not been seen for 5 days. Now, here you see the police anger and arguments. William L. Limpick, 16, was booked in the Stevens County Jail on Saturday for the investigation of first-degree murder. Sheriff Craig Thayer said a court appearance was scheduled for Tuesday. The boy had a juvenile record and had been having problems, Thayer said. It does not appear that there was it does appear that there were some anger and arguments that had occurred not just recently, but over some period of time, he said. So, first of all, before we continue, notice that here people identified there was a problem. They identified there was anger issues. And of course, nobody really, you can never just look at somebody and tell how bad it's going to get or how out of control it's going to get. But you do know that with all of us, unless a solution is given, you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Whenever we let our emotions take control of us, the only thing that brings it back in is for us ourselves to remind ourselves what we're doing is wrong, or for someone that's around us to tell us what we're doing is wrong. But we have to be reminded either by ourselves or someone else. And think about, for a lot of us here, we've been taught this information for years. Think about people that have never been taught this information. They play video games where the answer is to kill people. They watch movies where the answer is to kill people. In fact, that's the best ones to watch, right? That's the ones that really get your blood pumping. But we teach in society this ripple effect that the answer to problems is kill the bad guy. Well, who's the bad guy? Well, you determine who the bad guy is. That's for you to decide. Whether they're bad or not, that's for you to decide. And then, of course, once you do it, well, here comes law enforcement saying you had no right to do that. You know, and a lot of people, I've seen it before where someone said, you send me to war and tell me to kill everybody. I shoot one person here and you call me a murderer. I don't quite understand that. So I need, if these people were in Gaza, we could have dropped a bomb on them. I wouldn't even have had to shoot them. And it would have been okay. They could have been waving a white flag and we'd have still said it's okay. It'd been, oh, sorry. Didn't mean it. Once again, think about the minds that pass these defense bills and how responsible they are, or lack thereof, and then how we treat society. But these role models, these leaders, are making decisions very different than the rules that we're applying to society. Here it says, shocked, concerned neighbors. The neighbor, Leah Richardson, who called the sheriff's office on Friday to ask deputies to check on the family, said she had been trying to call Robert Limpbeck and his wife, Deanna, for several days after noticing one of their horses loose. I'd see the lights on, I'd call, and nobody would answer the phone, she said. It's a shock to me, said Earl Humbert, another neighbor. Everybody kind of keeps to themselves up here pretty much. You know, sometimes the biggest problem you can have is keeping to yourself. If you see there's a problem, let someone know. Doesn't mean you have to get involved yourself, but tell someone. You know, this can be very deceptive in thinking that, oh, no, I shouldn't get involved in this. They'll work it out. They'll work it out somehow. You know, I remember seeing a video, and this was many years ago. We showed it in the Peaceful Solution. I should have pulled it for tonight's class, where it showed a young man had an opportunity to prevent a crime, and he chose not to do it. And I think this was even put into a movie that I would not show, but I had someone tell me about it being in a movie, kind of the same story plot. But he decided to stay out of it, and later that night, a family member was killed by the same person. And he could have played a role in calling the police and doing something that if that person had been stopped, their family member wouldn't have died. When we think that, it'll work itself out, we shouldn't get involved. Well, tell that to Egypt and Syria and Lebanon right now. Tell that to Jordan. None of them believe it right now. Tell that to the Baltic states that surround Ukraine. None of them are believing it right now. Tell that to South Korea or even North Korea. And then Japan. How would you like to be the country somebody's shooting missiles over you constantly? You know, and if one accidentally hits, you'll hear, oh, sorry, didn't mean to. But that's the society we're living in, and that's the ripple effect that is taking place. But do you realize what is not being done? People do not take responsibility for their actions. There's no responsibility being implemented into this. And that's what we're saying is the most important thing And having self-control and not bringing harm to yourself or someone else is the application of this responsibility. Now, this young man can say, I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have killed my family. I take responsibility. Well, it was very irresponsible what was done. If he had took responsibility, the family would still be alive. If people who've seen the problems would have dealt with them efficiently, they could have prevented some things. You know, there's a lot of things that can be said about warnings that are given and people not adhering to them and people losing their lives. It seems that it comes out a lot when teenagers lose their lives. But I can tell you that the one thing the author of The Peaceful Solution did constantly was warn not just teenagers, but adults, be careful what you do because you can lose your life in an instant. There's no guarantee of tomorrow for anyone. And sadly, no one tends to listen to that until someone loses their life. And then some people turn around and go, well, I'm glad it wasn't me. And they continue off and doing what they're doing. I only say that because think of tonight. Here in the United States is going to be a very crazy night tonight. A lot of drinking, a lot of deaths on the road, a lot of stupidity. And sadly, right now we know that none of it has to take place. But look in the papers, Google tomorrow, see how many people get killed tonight on the roads here in the United States. It's a sad fact. And none of it has to take place. But it's going to, sadly. Continuing on here, it says, because of a lack of self-control, 4 people are dead, and a young man who should have been completing high school and looking into the future might instead be facing a life term in prison. And that's for the killing of 4 people. It says, we have a responsibility to treat others with respect. Being angry should not change that. You know, being angry is never, you never have the right when you're angry to, I think I'll just kill someone. You know, we've seen that in a city, and I'm not speaking bad of the city either. It's known as, I think it's been voted the safest town in the United States for many years, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And there was a really horrific murder took place there with a young man who was addicted to playing his video games who killed his family. And we were with a lot of our Peaceful Solution students. We actually had already scheduled to go to that city to take a tour of the police department, the fire department, to meet the city, because they have a state-of-the-art high school in that city. It's amazing. They're in Oklahoma, they have a high school like that. It is state-of-the-art. It is very impressive. And that's the reason we were going. But before we made our trip, that murder took place, and it was all over the news. And, of course, it kind of changed the outlook of our trip, even with the police department. You know, they were very careful about how they worded things. But once again, it was uncontrolled anger that caused these people to lose their lives. And, of course, here you have a city that's voted the safest city in the United States for many years running, and one person loses self-control, kills a lot of people, and that's plastered all over the news. And, of course, it looks like the city did it. Well, it's not. It's not the United States that's doing things either. As far as the citizens, it's a few people making decisions. The same in Ukraine, Gaza, whether it be Palestine, you know, whether you're looking at Somalia, all these other countries, it's only a few. Why does that matter? Because the majority, you know, as William said, this is the only time you're going to hear rebel in a positive way because it's a very negative word. But if people would say, I'm not going to kill anyone else again, I'm not doing this anymore. Because, and I'll say this, and I know this is going to irritate some people because I've said it before to some military people and they got really upset. But even war has become a war for cowards. Instead of flying the plane yourself, you fly your drone and you sit in the safety of your own country as you fly your drone to destroy other people. And it kills a lot of people. And we put it online. Oh, this person was assassinated. That person was assassinated. And people can't wait to get notoriety for doing it. But it doesn't solve problems. And I don't say that to say that people are cowards. And it's better if you fly the plane and bomb them. But we're getting to where we're flying these little drones and doing whatever we can to kill the bad guy. And once again, who decides who the bad guy is? If we flew these little drones in this room right here, well, I say little room, it's actually a pretty big room, and somebody decided that 10 of us were the bad guy. Does anybody know which 10's getting shot by the little drones? I think we would probably all be diving underneath the tables because none of us is going to trust who decided the bad guy is. You know, because I know some pretty scary people that might have a decision in that. But think about that. It's, if the majority would stand up and say no more, and I don't mean not by military confrontation or pulling out guns and starting a civil war, or Texas is going to sever itself from the Union and remember the Alamo and all this other stuff. No, not that. I'm talking about just refuse to bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. So not take up arms, but lay them down. And I know people can say, well, if we lay down our arms, China's not going to lay down theirs. If you're holding a gun at my head, I'm probably going to want to have a gun too. But if you take the gun away from my head, I'm more lenient to lay down my gun. And people aren't taking up these arms and developing nuclear weapons and building massive militaries for nothing. There's reasons behind this. And this year is 886 billion reasons why they're all doing it too. You know, a world of 10,000 nuclear bombs that can be destroyed by 100, and we need 10,000. We have got to be the smartest people in the universe, right? Once again, a very few group of people came up with those nuclear bombs. It wasn't the major part of society. It was a very few. But continuing on here, it says, here's what it boils down to. Anger is not a license to behave disrespectfully or violent. Control your tone of voice so that you can speak in a respectful way and communicate appropriately. Never use physical aggression to handle your anger. We are, once again, you can underline this and you can put we are supposed to be, but we are the most intelligent life on the planet. Surely we can find peaceful ways to handle our frustration. Hurting others because we're angry is wrong. You know, underline that, circle it, highlight it, do whatever you can, point arrows to it. It's wrong. There's nothing about it that makes it right. Not one thing. You know, Ukraine can do things against Russia or try to influence moral standards, and it's not really Ukraine that's doing it. We'll link it back to the sources that are actually in Ukraine that are doing it. And it's wrong for them to do what they're doing against Russia, but it's not right for Russia to send bombs or kill people either. No one is right in that situation. It wasn't right for what took place in Israel on October 7th for one day, and then Israel has continued to bomb the living hell out of Gaza for going on, 2 months, 3 months now? You start wondering, well, which one was worse here now? So one act of violence by this small group of people allows you to go in and to destroy a city of 4 million people? It's bizarre how we come up with what the right answer is. And if you watch the countries all gather around, no one has a clue what's right and wrong. You'll always hear them say, well, it's in America's interest, or it's in China's interest, or it's in Russia's interest, or it's in Syria's interest. It's always what is our country's interest. We don't really care about anybody else but our country. And sadly, we're the ones putting these borders up. Society is. The morals that hold society together are just tossed out the door. That's the lack of responsibility. Remember, a leader is always responsible to make sure morality, the rules are applied. That is the job of a leader. They are to make sure that the rules that bring forth peace are applied in society. I don't mean shoved down people's throat. I mean educated. And people can say, well, we do that. No, society doesn't. No, society doesn't. This very basic concept of what we're going through here, we've been into the prisons and we've taught. We've been into the juvenile halls and we've taught. We've been into the school systems and we taught. And everywhere we go, I never heard that. That makes so much sense. But as William talked about last time, when even teaching people in the cartel, they'll say, I agree with every bit of that, but I'm not ready for it yet. Doesn't fit into my life. I'll get there eventually, but not yet. At least that's honest. That's better than saying what I'm doing is the right way. Well, they know it's not. But notice here, hurting others is angry and wrong. Once you have dealt with anger in the right way, notice, let it go. And of course, this isn't the first time we've read this. This is the second time we've read that after we've dealt with something, we need to let it go. If you keep thinking about what caused you or made you angry, once again, this is you. What you feel made you angry, because no one makes you angry, you choose. We're talking about situations here. What made you angry, it will cause you to hate. It will cause hate and hostility to build up and become a part of your character. Keep in mind that an important part of developing a responsible character is controlling your thoughts so that you can be respectful even when you get angry. No matter what someone else does to you, learn to forgive and move on with life. Not everyone has learned how to practice the peaceful solution. I would say the majority has not learned that. And let's be honest, we are all striving to improve our positive character development, so give each other room to grow. And let's talk about people that are getting involved. And of course, the room to grow, if you remember, we covered that in the self-control unit, allowing people to have the space to improve. We all have faults. Everyone in this room has a fault. There's nobody here that doesn't have a problem that needs to be dealt with. The question becomes, are we actually dealing with the things that we need to deal with? That's really what the question becomes for us. Have we identified them, and are we working on them? And that's truly what determines whether our character is going in the positive direction or it's going the negative direction. Well, turning over here to page 32, and once again, we're still in procedure 4, it says, I can make self-control part of my character. So once again, this is using the character trait of determination, getting our mind set. It says, having self-control is an important part of developing a responsible character. By practicing self-control, you can stop yourself from making choices that could lead to embarrassment or harm to yourself or others. Once again, showing how these things work hand in hand, self-control and responsibility working together. Here are a few simple ways you can make self-control a part of your character. And this is being responsible. Responsible people make self-control a part of their character. Be aware of your thoughts, especially if you are angry or upset. Thoughts that are mean, hurtful, or violent toward yourself or others are negative. When these thoughts go through your mind, it is time to practice self-control. So think about that. And I want you to think about with what we just read. And then think about, and this is not an anti-military campaign that we're running here, but think about what people are taught to bring peace. We're going to give you these weapons, and we need you to go into this country, and we need you to take out the bad guy. Well, who's the bad guy? We'll tell you who the bad guy is. Well, what is his name? You don't get his name. We're going to give you a GPS location. And that's where the bad guy's at. And then you kind of like, is this like a deer crossing? Where they put up, this is where the deers cross, but deers really never cross there. They cross like 30 miles down the road. You know, I was in a country and I laughed about it. They had raccoon crossings, snake crossings, monkey crossings. And I finally asked the person I was with, I said, do these animals actually know what these signs are for? Do they come here and cross in this exact area? You know, it's like, doesn't make any sense. They had the whole zoo going down the road pretty much as a sign. But when you start determining, well, how many bad guys are there? Well, in Gaza, did they get the bad guy? Because I notice now they're assassinating people up in Syria after they destroyed Gaza. What are they doing? Oh, we're trying to get the bad guy. What damage did you do before you got who you considered is the bad guy? And once again, who's the bad guy? The one that went in and destroyed a city of 4 million people? Left a bunch of people homeless, destroyed what they worked their whole life for, which wasn't much because the economy is trash in Palestine. So who's the bad guy? You took away what little they had and left them with nothing. And before they can even start to rebuild, it's going to take a massive effort to clean up the destruction and the mess. You're talking about years in the making. So who's the bad guy? Once again, it wasn't every citizen of Palestine that went in to destroy, Israel. I feel sorry for Ukraine. I feel really sorry for them. I hope people study these things out and they learn why these things take place. You know, Russia has a right to defend the morality of their country and to reject things that would hurt someone else or the environment, but they don't have the right to go in and hurt other people to defend that, even though I know they think that's their only option. And I know President Putin mentions the peaceful solution a lot. I know it's been presented to him before. And what he's doing right now is not the answer. And what people are doing to Russia, against Russia, is not the answer either. But it's the influence. They should look toward their advisors. That's where NATO should look. They should consider who their advisor is and who is directing this, who's causing this. You'll find out when our world is falling apart, when things are being destroyed, when $886 billion are being spent, it's not a lot of people that's making these decisions. It's a very small group that affects the world, and their ripple effect ripples very hard. Society has to turn. Society has to decide what they want to do. And I don't mean by force or violence. By education. By the every word of this education. That's truly what will bring peace. Continuing on here in step 2, it says, stop and consider how these thoughts could lead you to behave. Remember, thoughts lead to actions. For instance, violent thoughts can lead to physical aggression. A common form of physical aggression in school is fighting. Fighting can lead to physical injury, suspension, injury, suspension, or even expulsion. And number 3, once you have evaluated your thoughts and consider your actions and their consequences, stop again and start replacing those negative thoughts with positive ones. Instead of thinking how much you dislike someone, think instead about his or her positive qualities. By controlling negative thoughts, you can learn to make responsible choices. You know, one thing about everybody in society, and the author of The Peaceful Solution would go into detail with this, there's something positive in everyone. There's something negative in everyone too. And sometimes one outweighs the other, but everyone has something positive in them. Sometimes you got to look really hard, but everyone has something positive in them. And of course, people have things that are negative in them too. But we really need to consider, and really what I hope for tonight's class, I would encourage everybody to go back and watch the class William taught before this class, and then watch this class again, because a lot of the things that I said, I didn't go back and repeat everything he said, but they tie in together on this global scale of responsibility. And the lack of responsibility that's being used, the lack of self-control that's being implemented. And we kind of, we talked about, or William went over the scenario of someone stepping on someone's shoes, and how it leads to aggression. But also think about it on a global scale. What is done that's causing this aggression? When you think about Essequibo, that area between Guyana and Venezuela, and I just say that for sake of argument, it's an area of land there that Guyana has claimed. Nobody cared about it until oil was found. Once oil was found, oh man, now they're ready to go to war over it. Other countries, the UK sent military ships, the United States sent military ships, Russia's going to be sending military ships, China's wanting to develop oil. All of these nations are getting involved, and you know who's falling to the side? Guyana and Venezuela. People starving to death. Now, Guyana's starting to get some oil money. So they're like, oh, yeah, we love this. This is great, because they were a poor country. Venezuela is still saying, well, we've got more oil than anybody. We're still starving to death. Why do we allow these things to take place as a society? Where are the responsible leaders that would bring these things forth? So once again, we're covering this in a school setting, but really, as we're teaching teachers to teach this program, you can get your students to agree with something, but unless you can do it on a global scale, the world's going to get really bad, really quick. So this has to be done on a global scale, and we have to push this. When I say push, I don't mean by never doing anything that causes aggression, ever. Literally just through education. Peace can only come through education. That has been a saying in the Peaceful Solution for as long as I can remember. And we really have to take that up. We're going to stop right here. The next procedure we're going to get into is procedure 5, and that's covering something on you'll have to have your teacher's manual for this, so make sure you have a teacher's manual. We're going to be pulling something off of lesson plan 2, page F. It's going to be dealing with some thoughts and how to process negative and positive thoughts. So make sure you have your teacher's manual, because this is found. We'll also have it on a slide for everyone to see, but you'll want it because you might want to make some notes on it also. So our next class is going to be this coming Wednesday, January the 3rd of 2024, and we'll join back with everyone once again, picking up between pages 32 and 33 with the Procedure 5 at 5:30 p.m. that day. Thank you very much for joining us.